The following is an Infinity One Productions presentation, keeping it honest, insightful, interactive. You're listening to the RCWR Show with Lee Sanders.
All right, you are checking out a special Thursday night edition of the RCWR Show on September 26, 2013, just a couple of minutes past the 11 o'clock hour here on the East Coast. A very good evening to you all. All right, we teased you guys long enough. Let's go on ahead and let's jump right into it. Our guest tonight is the host of not one, but two radio shows. Eddie Trunk Rocks on Q104.3 in New York City. That's also syndicated nationally. And Eddie Trunk Live every Monday night, 6 to 10 p.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Radio, Channel 39. Since 2002, he's played a vital role on VH1's sister station, VH1 Classic, where he has been seen hosting the hit interview series called Hanging With, and also appeared in many specials. This would ultimately take him to hosting and co-producing one of the longest-running programs on VH1 Classic, a show I know many fans, including myself, love very dearly, called That Metal Show. He possesses an insightful, passionate, extensive, and knowledgeable background in all things hard rock and heavy metal that has him regarded as one of its ambassadors. Without a doubt, he's one of the most honest guys that's out there. He just released his newest book, Eddie Trunk's Essential Hard Rock and Heavy Metal Volume 2, in stores now. To follow up to his first book in 2010, where he gives very candid thoughts on some of the greatest bands of all time. Some of the acts he covers this time around include Alice in Chains, Extreme, Dream Theater, Lita Ford, just to name a few. We're very humbled and honored to welcome the one and only Mr. Eddie Trunk. Eddie, how you doing tonight, sir?
Thank you so much for having me, guys, and I appreciate that introduction, and I appreciate the attention to detail. You had just about everything down perfectly there. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, sir. No, we appreciate you. How you doing tonight?
I'm good. A little tired. I just finished my first 3 signings for the new book. Just wrapped up one on Staten Island tonight at Barnes & Noble that went extremely well, and I just got home actually seconds ago, and now I've got to pack a bag and hitting the road for the first time away from my home area for signings, which start in Cincinnati tomorrow. So I fly to Cincinnati, sign tomorrow, and then right after I'm done with that, drive to Cleveland. So the madness is in full effect, but I am not complaining at all. I'm happy to be doing it, and I'm really excited to get out there and see the fans at these signings who have supported me for 30 years. It's been awesome so far.
Awesome. I know me and my staff, we had a chance to read your book before its release, and I got to say, sincerely, it's a really good read. I personally found myself continuing to go through page after page. It was just very hard to put down. I'm actually reading it a second time right now, and I know after the release of Volume 1 and receiving feedback for it, was it pretty obvious to you that you had to do a sequel to it? If not, what was the moment that had you go, it's time to do another one?
Yeah, it happened pretty quickly afterwards, and I got to tell you, this new book, Volume 2, has been out for 3 days, and I'm already getting asked about Volume 3. So it seems like the writing's on the wall for that one. But with the first one, that was uncharted territory for me. I had never written a book. I had never had no experience whatsoever on what it was like to work with a publisher and how that was all going to play out. And I don't think, to be honest with you, I think both, me and to some degree my publisher was a little bit caught off guard at the success so quickly of the first book. And we were all really pleasantly surprised. So shortly afterwards, there was a talk about, hey, well, we'd like to do another one of these someday if you're up for it. And for me, one of the big problems with the first book was the fact that I had to cut out a number of bands that I wanted to write about, but I couldn't because I simply ran out of space. So in that first book, in the back few pages, there's a section that says More Essentials, just talking about some bands that I didn't get to do a full treatment on, and those were the obvious starting point for the follow-up book, and most of those bands are featured in full in Volume 2. So it was really shortly after that both the publisher asked and I started to think, yeah, there's definitely enough bands here to do another. And now that I've completed the second one and it's just come out, As I said, there's a bunch of bands that aren't included in one or two that people are asking about. So, the way this one's off to such a great start, I think probably likely that maybe in a couple of years we'll be talking about a 3. But right now the focus is all on 2 and the first book. Having done 3 signings already, it's amazing how many people are picking up the first book still as well and getting them as kind of companions, which is really what they are. So it's been great, and I'm really grateful for everybody's support.
Awesome. Now, you've been covering hard rock and metal since 1983. I mean, from being a young kid going to your friend's house to see what bands are playing on MTV, to working in a record store, to working radio, even working for a record label and playing a big hand in the signing of key bands that you cover in this book. Looking back, did you ever think it would take you to the heights that it has?
No, I'll tell you, for me, it always was and still is just really being a fan. I mean, I started 30 years ago in this business because I wanted to spread the word about bands that I loved to other fans and help promote them in a respectful way and an honest way too. When you see something you don't like, say it as a fan, and when you love something, say it. And I really, that was really what the catalyst was always for me from the beginning. There was never some master plan of let me try to get on TV, let me try to get on the radio, let me do this, let me do that. It was all driven by how can I work with and be around the rock scene that I love so much, play a role in helping grow it. And, as time went on, of course, also it became important to try to make a living at it, because when I first started 30 years ago, I was a kid, I was a teenager, and I was really it was about, hey, if I get a free ticket to a show or meet one of these artists and help them out, that would be awesome. And as time goes on and your life changes, obviously I'm in a position now where I'm supporting a family and have 2 young kids, and that comes into play as well, where of course it's still your passion and you're still doing it for the right reasons, but you then have to start thinking about, okay, can I actually support my family on this? And I've been extremely lucky that I've been able to do that. So it's really the best of both worlds. I'm still doing what I love, and also making a living at it. And there's nothing better than making a living at doing what you love. So it's been great as far as that's concerned, and I've been lucky to be able to do that. I've worked real hard to be able to do that, and I've certainly gotten some breaks along the way, but it has been definitely just something that just driven from my love of these bands really from day one, and it's still what keeps me going now.
Following up on that, it's been said that if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Would you agree with that?
I don't know if I'd go that far. There are days, and I'm not complaining at all, but there are days with the various things that I do that honestly feel like a lot of work. And again, I wouldn't trade it for the world, but there are days that feel like a ton of work. I mean, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that goes on all these various gigs that people really don't see or hear about that can be very stressful at times and really, be very challenging and taxing in a lot of ways. Just keeping it together, keeping things going, growing things, whatever the case may be. So it's not. Again, I'm not digging ditches for a living, but there is a degree, and there are weeks that are much, that'll challenge you. And I pretty much do everything myself. I host my shows, I produce my shows, I'm pretty much a one-man operation. I have some help in certain areas, but it can be a lot at times, and can't stress enough. I'm not complaining, but there are days that it does feel like work. I'll say that.
Okay. I remember reading one section of your book where you were talking about Marilyn Manson, and that one had really jumped out at me. And I don't want to go into details and give it all away, but I remember how you said that it was one of the most edited episodes of that metal show you did with Marilyn Manson. And for those of you curious, you got to pick up the book to find out why. When you reveal little snippets like that, whether it be good, bad, neutral, I'm curious, for some of the acts that you covered in this book, have you heard, any feedback from them, whether it's bad, or any of the above?
No, not really. I mean, I've heard tons of positive feedback, thankfully, and most of the bands love what I've written about them and the stories I've told. In the first book, I told a funny story about Tom Peterson from Cheap Trick. One night when he was, we found him pretty much passed out in the bushes, and most of these artists acknowledge that back in their old days they were quite the handful, and they had their demons and they had their issues. Many of them are changed guys today and completely different. But I told that story about Tom, and Tom asked me about it recently, and he had no recollection of it, but he wouldn't because he was loaded. And the other guys in Cheap Trick were there, and they said there's about 50 people that have similar stories with Tom. That's what he was like back then. So. You hear stuff like that, and most bands get a chuckle out of it, and they enjoy reading about things they forgot they did themselves. So no, and the story about Manson, which is in the new book in Volume 2, that's just what happened. I mean, anybody that knows anything about Manson knows that he's never been a guy that plays it safe, and he has his fun, and he likes to be controversial. So. That really shouldn't come as a surprise that, the Manson episode had to be severely edited because he said some really unbelievably inappropriate things for TV that was never going to fly. But for me, that's what Manson is about. I mean, when Manson came on the set and everybody either loved him or hated him, and that, in essence, is what Marilyn Manson even stands for. Marilyn, after Marilyn Monroe, and beautiful and loved, and Charles Manson, hated, and the devil. So that in and of itself is what the whole Marilyn Manson world has been. And if you're going to book Marilyn Manson on TV, I would be disappointed if it wasn't that.
Right. I can understand that. Yeah. Now, I visit your website over at eddietrunk.com all the time. It's a great site, by the way. I know you briefly... Oh, yeah, you're welcome. I know you mentioned some news on that metal show, and I hope you don't mind me asking, but for the folks that didn't catch it online, is there any new updates you can provide on that?
Nothing except for the fact that we're definitely going to do more shows. The network has asked for us to do them. We're in the process now of discussing and working some details out with them to sort out how, when, and where we're going to do it. So the discussions are ongoing. We're certainly going to do them. It's just a question of when and where and how. We made some big changes in the last season of the show, and we have to decide what we're keeping from that and what we're not. We also have for a long time done the show in Los Angeles. After starting doing it in New York, we moved it to L.A. because most musicians live there, and it's just easier to get them to do the show. But there's been some talk about maybe relocating it back to New York. So everything is on the table right now, and we're all kind of chiming in, and we're all discussing stuff, and we're all just we're all figuring out when, where, and how we're going to do more. And when we know that, then we'll be able to move forward and book guests and announce tape dates and all that. One of the things, regardless of location that we do it in, and I'm really hoping and pushing for, is that when we do start up production, that we do more consecutive new shows than what we've been doing. The last few runs of shows have been very short seasons, been like 8 episodes, and they seem to be over before they start, and a lot of fans are upset by that, and we wish we were doing it more too. But that all just comes down to budget, and we're trying to find a way that maybe if we bring it back to New York, we'd be saving some money, and that would enable us to do longer seasons. So all of this stuff is being looked at and evaluated. At the end of the day, the network makes all the final decisions, and they say, they have final say on everything, but we're included in the discussion, and as soon as everybody can figure it out what the next phase is going to be, we'll get started.
Okay. Now, is there anything that fans can do to maybe get the network's attention to kind of rally in you all's quest to, have something get done right? I know I've definitely tweeted VH1 a couple of times, and I've received a very nice reply back. Quote, "We're working on it, Lee!" Exclamation, 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 smiley face.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, the fans of mine and the fans of ours on that metal show are phenomenal and incredibly passionate and supportive about what we do, and we're really, speaking for Don and Jim as well, we're all really grateful for that. And our social media person who probably responded to that is also, she's really cool too. And it's great, all that stuff is great, and maybe it gets through to them and maybe it doesn't, I don't know. But really all it comes down to is budgets. What people have to understand is that VH1 Classic, a tiny channel compared to regular VH1. And MTV and that whole company. I mean, you're probably the smallest fish as far as the channel we're on. So as a result, things are going to come really slow, and the amount of ability we have to do certain things is somewhat limited. But hopefully, the channel will continue to evolve, and the network will put more money into it and grow it, and we'll continue to go along for that ride and be the centerpiece for it. I mean, our show pretty much is the one thing on VH1 Classic that really is kind of appointment viewing that people come to. So that's a good thing. And the best thing fans can do is keep telling other rock fans to watch it and keep, growing it and helping us grow it, helping us get the word out about it. And hopefully everything else will fall into place from there. But it really all comes down to money at the end of the day, and what is the network willing to invest into it.
Well, I'm definitely keeping my fingers crossed and hoping for the best. I definitely like the idea of you guys coming on back to the East Coast and possibly getting more episodes of TMS. I'm down for that. I hope it happens, fingers crossed. I just have to ask you, as there's probably those that may not be aware of you and they're hearing you for the first time, could you tell them why? And you know what, guys, for those of you that don't know Eddie Trunk, I don't know, maybe you're like those Geico commercials or something. You've been living under a hut or a rock or something if you don't know Eddie Trunk. But tell the folks why they need to go out, buy this new book, Eddie Trunk's Essential Hard Rock and Heavy Metal Volume 2, why it's a must-have for their collection and what they can gain from it.
Well, the number one thing I would tell anybody is that if you are remotely into rock or hard rock or heavy metal music, I think you'll find the book entertaining, as well as the first book. If you're somebody that doesn't really know me or my history, you should certainly get the first book, which came out in 2011 and is just called Eddie Trunk's Essential Hard Rock and Heavy Metal. You don't need both books. One, they don't connect each other in any sort of sequence, but the reason why I say that is because the first book, if you're more of a casual fan, the first book has the mega bands in it. It has Sabbath, it has Zeppelin, it has AC/DC, it has Aerosmith, Kiss, Van Halen, bands that just about anybody at any level of fanaticism for rock music is going to know. So you will find that a very easy and fun read and maybe learn something as well. And Volume 2, which has just come out, is very much the direct sequel to that book. The same sort of layout, the same publisher, the same formula of it's important to note my books, there's a ton of rock books out these days. Many are autobiographies, many are extremely long and, a few photos but a ton of text, and many are great, but they're big undertakings to read. My books are not that. They are all, you can read them very easily in standalone chapters. There's photos, there's playlists. I've heard from tons of people who have discovered other songs from bands they love through just reading some of the playlists and some of my stories. And each chapter about each band will, both give a little overview of what the band's all about, and in most cases, a personal story about me and my interaction with them over the years, and sometimes a funny one, or sometimes, not so funny. But it's just a really little snapshot of a lot of different things about these bands. And if you're a casual fan, I've heard from tons of people who have been pulled into this world because of the book. And if you're a hardcore fan, it's something you're going to want to read the photos and just get my take on it if you're a fan of what I do. So across the board, I mean, there's really a little something for everybody, providing that you have some interest in rock music.
Okay. I agree with that 100%. It's definitely a must-read, folks. I can't stress it enough. Once you start reading it, you're going to want more, and I'm definitely with the millions of fans that checked out this new volume. I'm now waiting for Volume 3, so I can't wait. I just got to say, and this is a true story, I've never said this to our listeners before, and we've been on air since like 2011, but I've never shared this story before. One of the first times I came across you, it was in 2007 on VH1 Classic. I saw your sit-down interview with one of my favorite singers of all time, Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin, on an episode of Hanging With, as the two of you were discussing Robert's 9 Lives box set as he reflected on key points in his career as a solo artist. And I just had loved how you were sitting across from the rock god, cool, collected, but you did genuinely came off excited, and I was like, who's this guy again? What's his name? And I've been a fan of yours ever since that interview, and it just gave me that extra passion and drive to see some of my favorite acts perform live. And Robert Plant was actually my first concert that I went to at Constitution Hall in D.C. back in 2011, and I've been making it my business ever since to keep going to concerts, and I pretty much owe that all to you, man.
Well, wow, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And, I mean, it was obviously a phenomenal honor for me to have interviewed Robert, not only once but twice. That was actually the second time I did an interview with him for VH1 Classic. Both times we shot them in England. There's a picture of me, Robert Plant, and Ronnie James Dio in my first book, and that photo comes from that shoot because the next day I interviewed Black Sabbath with Dio returning to the band. So it was obviously an amazing experience to have been there and done that with two incredible singers and icons like that. I had actually interviewed Robert a year or two prior also for VH1 Classic, and it's funny, Lee, because there's a lot of people that don't know about my pre-That Metal Show VH1 Classic years, but that's just because the channel was in a lot fewer homes and not as many people saw the stuff, but I did an amazing amount of interviews back then under that title of Hanging With, and there was a ton of artists that I spoke with back then, and I really enjoyed doing all that stuff. There was a great variety of music. I'm into a lot of stuff, and it was really fun to do those interviews, and I'm glad that some people saw them. I wish there was a way more people could see them now, because I think they'd be surprised at some of the stuff that I did back then. But Robert was very cool to work with, and I think I told a little story about it in my first book of having done that interview that you saw, and that was the second. So I had interviewed him twice, and it goes without saying, love to have him on That Metal Show, but I don't know, under the metal title, it's not something he really normally gravitates to. But of course, if he wanted to do it, we'd be honored to have him.
Right, my fingers crossed. Yeah, I'd love to see that. I just got to say from the bottom of my heart, and I'm sure many of our listeners will share these same sentiments, thank you so much for doing your part in keeping hard rock and metal alive, because for a lot of us, especially those of us born in the 60s, 70s, 80s, we're living in that period right now where rock and metal, it isn't given the glorified spotlight and dominance it once had on the airwaves, especially on television. With great ambassadors like you covering it on radio and with That Metal Show, it's really been helping keep it mainstream as new generations of fans embrace it. And we always tell guests that stop by the show that they're more than welcome to come back. As it's no exception. We really would love to have you back, and maybe one day we can kick back and play some jams and talk all things rock, whatever we can do. We'd love to definitely stay in touch with you, and if there's anything we can do, no matter how big or small, let us know. We'd be more than happy to help.
Well, that's really kind of you, and I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the support, and I'll take you up on that as soon as I can get a window in the schedule. Right now, I'm in the thick of what will be the busiest. Probably the busiest month of my life between this book tour that I'm currently on, and I'm going to Brazil for the first time in the middle of October to host a festival there. So I've got a lot going on at the moment, which I'm really happy about, but it's just, just got to get through what's a really crazy patch at the moment. But I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me, and I would just tell folks that the best way to keep up with everything going on that I have going down is to check out eddietrunk.com and also really up to the second changes and news and things that happen is Twitter, and that's just at Eddie Trunk. And this book tour I'm on is tomorrow night, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Milwaukee, Chicago, Tempe, Arizona, Los Angeles, Las Vegas. So there's a big string of dates coming up, and then I come back, I do another one in New Jersey. I just added Boston at the end of October. So I'm adding dates where I can as my schedule permits, and I hope that people, who are remotely within striking distance of these areas can come out and say hello and buy a book, or don't buy a book and just come out and say hello if you want. And all the information is right on the homepage of eddietrunk.com, the dates that I'm doing, and as they get added or changed, we'll put them up there as well. And the book's available now. Both books are available now wherever you buy books, and also digitally as well. If you are into having them on a Kindle or an iPad, you can certainly buy them that way. I tend to think that they look a little bit better as a real physical book, but if you are purely a digital guy, you can buy that way as well right now. And really appreciate everybody doing so, and I really appreciate you, Lee, taking the time to talk to me and help spread the word.
Oh, yeah, always. Well, definitely safe travels during your book tour, because I know you're going to be all over the place. And, we'll definitely keep up to date with you. Once again, that's at eddietrunk.com. I know you're also on Twitter, at Eddie Trunk. Eddie, thank you so much, man. You have a good night.
Thanks. And, there's a Facebook, too. It's Facebook/Eddie Trunk. I try to get on that a little bit as well. But, through all those things, you can find me pretty much anywhere and keep up with what's going on. And, Lee, you have a great night as well. And, again, I appreciate the time, and it's great to talk to you.
All right. Now, have a good one. Thank you so much, sir.